This is Small Town Dark Truths, and I have my coffee because it is very early this morning. It's very early, but I'm here, and we're going to be getting into this story for today. This is episode 2. Our first episode is now up on YouTube, so please go check that out. It's a good one, but this one is a lot longer. I have a lot more information on this case, so it's probably going to be twice as long, but it's kind of crazy. It's terrible, but it's crazy, and we're going to get into that. But this season we traveled to Winder, Georgia. It's about an hour northeast of Atlanta, and like I said before, I did grow up there, but we'll get into that at our debrief at the end of this season. I'll see you there. Talking unscripted, it's gonna be fun. I'm gonna have a special guest, and I'm so excited to get there. Maybe one day I'll make it there. Maybe one day. It took me way too long to post the first episode. But I'll see you there eventually. Anyway, let's get on with the story for... Did I even do my whole entire intro? Did I do my intro? If I didn't do my intro, we're gonna do it now. This is Small Town Dark Truths, and I'm your host, Alexis. I think I did it, but I'm not 100% sure. So if I didn't, there it is. Anyway, let's get on with the episode for today. It's a good one. You can judge a town by the stories it keeps. Some of them are stories that we tell at cookouts. They're small and safe and familiar. And some of them we only whisper in the dark because, well, they have teeth. And the story tonight is definitely a whispered one because it definitely has teeth. A woman found dead in a well, a husband charged with murder, and a court fight that asks a hard question. What counts as provocation? I hope I'm saying that right. Provocation. And in my opinion, nothing counts because we shouldn't be taking lives. I don't know why this is a question, but apparently it's a very big question in the court system because it determines how long someone's going to be in there, if they're going to be charged with life or maybe like 40 years. It's a big difference. And the whole entire court side of this case is that question. What counts as provocation? This is Small Town Dark Truths. I'm your host Alexis, and this episode is called The Well. We're going to be covering the Tonya Lynn case. Tonya Faye Lynn was 38 years old. She was a mother of 4. She was someone's friend, someone's daughter, and someone's sister. And people that still remember her talk about her as being a woman who cared for her family and fought hard for the life that she wanted for her children. Tonya was known for being dependable. She showed up to work, took care of her family, and wouldn't just vanish without a trace. So when she didn't clock in one morning, her friends knew something was not right. It was late July of 2011 when the Georgia heat is heavy and it feels like it's weighing down on you. That's when the story hit local news, and the details were small and sharp. A woman was found missing and her SUV showed up in an abandoned parking lot. And then the unimaginable. Her body was found at the bottom of a well. And this reads like a horror story outline, but these were real people and this was real lives, and these are real children that are now left without their mother. We'll move carefully through the facts tonight, what happened the night that Tonya disappeared, and how her husband, James Morris Lynn Jr., was charged, tried, convicted, and then later retried, and how the highest state courts dealt with that evidence. To tell the story properly, we'll have to look at what Tonya's life looked like before that fateful summer night. Tonya and James were married for 16 years, and they had 4 children together. But by 2011, the marriage was under enormous strain. Public records and court filings, the ones that were later used as evidence in the trial against James, shows that there was separation, filing for divorce, and allegations of domestic conflict. People who knew the couple said that things were tense and that they've been together for years and built a life together, but lately things have not been very peaceful. There are whispers of threats, control, and a relationship unraveling behind those four walls. Court documents say that she did obtain a temporary protective order. It is a legal step that people take when they fear for their safety. In May of 2011, an incident did happen in the house. Tonya was allegedly startled and fell into a course of an argument. She injured a knee, the kind of injury that later witnesses recalled when reconstructing the months before her death. By late July, she told family members that she was going to leave him. A cousin would later tell police and courts that Tonya said, quote, "I've decided for sure that I'm leaving him." Tonya packed, she took steps, and that sense of resolve, wanting to get out, would be super important in this story. Strangely, this wasn't the first tragedy that followed James Morris Lynn. Decades earlier, another woman in his life, his first wife, died under strange circumstances. At the time, her death had been ruled as a suicide. She was found with one bullet wound in her head, and after Tonya's disappearance, that old case quietly was reopened for review. And people started asking, was this an awful coincidence or possibly a pattern that was missed? That detail and the fact that Tonya was resolved to leave is empathy fuel. It's also one of the reasons that the case in court has two competing narratives. One in which a frightened woman tried to escape an abusive relationship, and another advanced by the defense in court in which emotions like alleged betrayal and provocation are woven into the claim that the was not premeditated but an act of violent passion. The legal system had to sort those stories out, and it would be messy. Now we'll get on to the actual story of what happened now that I have this slight intro. Okay. Late July of 2011, days that should have been ordinary, school drop-offs, work, phone calls, were not ordinary for the Lynn family. On July 26, Tonya was expected at work, but she did not show. At first, people tried to stay calm. Maybe her phone died, or maybe she just needed space. But when her SUV, a dark-colored Chevy Tahoe, was found parked outside the local library, everything changed. Her purse was still inside, her keys, and her phone, but there was no signs of her. The time recorded on the surveillance footage and the police logs placed the car there around 1:38 a.m., and witnesses say that a man was seen driving it. I don't know who's up at 1:38 a.m., but think the above for them, because, I don't know if we would have been able to piece this together, because supposedly the surveillance footage, you can see the car, but you can't really see who was driving it. I don't know. That's just what I found. A woman named Jennifer Butler later told investigators that James Lynn had called her and asked her to pick up the vehicle. And days passed and there was no sign of Tonya. Volunteers searched fields, woods, creeks. The sheriff's department even brought in dogs, drones, and dive teams. Then, nearly 3 days later, a tip led investigators to an old property just outside of town. And when they arrived, this search turned grim very, very quickly. In a densely wooded area off of Ethridge Road, dotted with barns and sheds, in the back corner was a well, a very old well, one used generations ago. And under brush, searchers found Tonya's body, and her family identified her that very same day. The autopsy later confirmed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and the forensic characterization states that her skull had been struck with something and it was not caused by falling into the well. Once Tonya's body was found, investigators started focusing in on the people closest to her, her friends and her family, and especially her estranged husband, James Lynn. The records show that Lynn intentionally gave false and misleading information to the police about Tonya's whereabouts, and prosecutors later argued that those lies signaled consciousness of guilt. Investigators also discovered that Lynn deleted or wiped data from his cell phone when police asked to review it, another thing that raised suspicion. The autopsy again was key. Blunt force trauma to the head is not an accidental injury. It implies an assault with a heavy instrument. Later, Lynn would confess to hitting Tonya with a bat and also led investigators to the well where they did find her body. That confession became central to the prosecution. But the defense did push back, painting a more complicated picture full of emotions, alleged infidelity, and the dynamics of a collapsing marriage could change how jurors view the mental state behind the killing. And why do these details matter? Truth be told, I don't really know, because he killed his wife and put her in a well. But these details do matter in a case like this, because what starts as physical evidence, a battered skull, a car parked at night, quickly becomes the medium through which competing narratives are told, premonition or provocation. Sorry, I can't say that word right. Control versus fear. James Morris Lynn Jr. was indicted by a Barrow County grand juror in October of 2011. The charges were serious: malice murder, felony murder based on aggravated assault, and aggravated assault, among others. The prosecutor's case would combine physical evidence, witnesses, and Lynn's very own statements. The first trial took place in 2012. The prosecutor argued that Lynn beat Tonya to death with an instrument, the baseball bat, and then attempted to cover the crime by moving her body to a secluded well. They presented the timeline, the abandoned car in a parking lot, witness statements about Lynn's behaviors, and the cell phone activity and deletions, and also the autopsy, which that sounds like what happened to me. I don't really know why we're trying to paint another picture, but again, it's the defense's job. I get it. Importantly, for that trial, the prosecutors did exclude certain evidence that the defense wanted to introduce. Specifically, evidence alleging Tonya to having a recent extramarital affair, including testimonies that might suggest that she had taunted Lynn or provoked him. The trial judge agreed with the prosecutor that much of that evidence was not admissible. The court limited what the defense could show regarding Tonya's alleged relationships. In June of 2012, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of malice murder. Lynn received life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the family of Tonya, some of whom were in the courtroom, the conviction was a moment of devastating closure, but for Lynn and his lawyers, it began the legal fight on appeal. Lynn appealed his conviction to the Georgia Supreme Court, and the heart of his argument: that the court made legal errors by excluding certain evidence about Tonya's alleged infidelity and interactions that the defense could argue was relevant to his state of mind. Under Georgia law, there is a narrow category in which a person who kills in the heat of passion or sudden violent rage provoked by the victim's conduct can be convicted of voluntary manslaughter instead of malice murder. That kind of defense requires showing the provocation and that it was sufficient to inflame a reasonable person. The appeal court agreed that the trial court misapplied the laws of admissibility. In 2014, the Georgia Supreme Court vacated Lynn's first conviction and ordered a new trial. The court's decision did not say Lynn was innocent. It said that the defendant had the right to present certain evidence that the jury should have been allowed to consider in the first place. That decision sent shockwaves through the case because it meant that the prosecution would have to retry and that the jurors of a new trial would hear a different story. What the Georgia Supreme Court did was annoying, but it is fundamental. It's a reminder that justice systems must follow rules of evidence even in the most emotionally charged cases. The retrial took place in late summer of 2015 from August 26 to September 3rd. This time, the judge allowed more defense evidence concerning Tonya's alleged actions and relationships. The defense counsel argued that these facts were relevant to a claim of sudden passion and to explain why Lynn would have been provoked beyond reasonable measures. The prosecution retold its case. They emphasized the physical evidence, Tonya's injuries, the scene in the well, the timeline of the abandoned vehicle, Lynn's post-event conduct, and the deletion of the phone data. Witnesses testified on both sides. We have family members, neighbors, police officers, forensic experts. The jury heard conflicting threads. On one hand, evidence of planning, of concealment, and of violent force, and on the other hand, claims of provocation and emotional disturbance. In September of 2015, the jury returned a verdict, guilty again on the malice murder charge. The judge again sentenced Lynn to life in prison without parole. For prosecutors and for Tonya's family, the verdict felt like justice reaffirmed. For defense advocates or for the legal observers, the case now posed a question of the interplay of passion, provocation, and culpability. After the retrial conviction, Lynn again sought appealment review. In 2020, the Georgia Supreme Court heard additional claims, ineffective assistance of counsel and others, and ultimately affirmed the malice murder conviction while noticing some sentencing techniques. For example, the aggravated assault count merged with the murder conviction and sentence adjustments followed. That 2020 decision closed any doors that could have led another reversal. Thank goodness. From a legal perspective, this case became an extensive conversation about what evidence a defendant may introduce to show a state of mind, and where the line lies between explanation and excuse. After the trial, questions still lingered about the earlier death, the first wife decades before. The case was reviewed by in-state investigators, but no charges have been filed. So I don't know what's going on with that, but it's highly suspicious. I will say that. But, from what I know, he didn't do anything with that. Tonya left 4 children. The loss of a parent in such a violent way is indescribable. And the family's mourning, as reported in local news, is both private and public. They were witnesses to the legal process, to verdicts that tried to place meaning on what happened. For the community in Winder, this case is a long shadow. People wondered, could this have been prevented? Were there warning signs? Did neighbors know that Tonya was afraid? Some residents told the reporter that they had no idea she felt in such danger. Others said that there were small signs of trouble. This case also had external ripples. It became an example in legal circles of the rules surrounding evidence in the heat of passion defenses. It became a talk piece about domestic violence and how courts decide what the jury can hear. We are left with persistent questions, and I will put a few on the table. Tonya said she was leaving. Did the system provide enough protection? She had a temporary protective order, but those are only as strong as the enforcement and as safe as the resources allow. Does alleged infidelity ever justify taking a life? I don't think it does, but the law draws sharp lines here. Lynn wiped his phone. What was on the phone? I want to know. I want to know what was on there. And if he was trying to prove infidelity, do you think that, why would he wipe his phone if, I don't know. I don't know, but I want to know what's on there. We should also be candid about how the media and community processes a case like this. There is empathy for the victim and pressure for accountability. There's also the risk that tragic stories simplify to monster and victim, but we also always have to remember that these are real humans and real lives, real children that are affected by this story. So let's just remember that when we go on and talk about stories like this. If you are listening and you know someone is in danger, maybe someone in a relationship that feels like it's spiraling into violence, please reach out to local resources. shelters, or law enforcement. Protective orders, safety planning are available. Call the National Domestic Hotline at 800-799-7233. There is always a way out, I promise you. Tonya Lynn's story is, on the surface, a criminal case with a guilty verdict. Beneath that, it is also a story about human relationships and how fragile safety is. If you have information related to a historical or unsolved crime, please contact the Barrow County Sheriff Department. Everything matters, anything matters. It's just please contact them. Do not hide anything. Your word matters. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Small Town Dark Truths. I am your host, Alexis. Let's keep questioning, let's keep probing, because dark truths often hide where we least expect them. I will see you next week with our next episode. Bye! But wait, don't go anywhere. I have a preview for the next episode. Ignore how I look. I forgot to film this part, so I'm filming it now, but I didn't get myself ready, so ignore that. But we are going to be staying in Winder. We are going to take a slight detour to Florida, but a news reporter goes missing, and his body is found in cement in someone's backyard. We do know who did it, so we're going to be talking about that, and we also know why. And the reason why, Magic the Gathering. I will see you next week in our next episode when we get into this case. Stay safe.